The Seahawks have a new quarterback in town in Sam Howell. Will the former North Carolina Stars arrival diminish the chances of John Schneider picking a quarterback in next month's draft? We're going to be diving in here on an early Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined here on an early Monday episode by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. We are now more than a week into free agency, and most of the players have already flown off the shelves. There will be some more activity as we go with teams continuing to fill up their rosters heading towards next month's draft. But the Seahawks made a peculiar move in some people's minds, in my opinion, an exciting move last week by adding Sam Howell. We'll be diving into what that means for Seattle's chances of picking a quarterback in the draft. We'll be looking at your mailbag questions and diving into our latest mock draft offerings coming out of the first week of free agency. It's a jam-packed episode brought your way by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Now for your lead story here on our latest edition of Locked On Seahawks. The Seahawks made an unexpected move, at least for some people last week, trading away a 3rd and 5th round pick for a 4th and 6th round selection, as well as quarterback Sam Howell. Ultimately, it was a pick swap that was conducted by John Schneider to bring in a young, experienced 23-year-old quarterback in Howell. And with that move, Rob, there's already been a lot of discussions out there. Some are wondering, was this a move of desperation? Drew New York, the Seahawks concerned about their ability to get one of the top quarterbacks. And really the bottom line is, I do think that that was a big part of this trade happening, because you look at some of the mock drafts out there, some of the murmurs coming out behind closed doors. It looks like we could see as many as 4 quarterbacks gone in the first 5 to 7 picks. And the Seahawks, even before this trade, just didn't have the ammunition to be able to jump that high without giving up multiple first-round picks in the future. And even then, they might not have been able to put together a package to do so. So this seemed like a really good stepping stone to getting a young quarterback at an affordable rate that may or may not have a chance to start for Seattle down the road.
No, I think that Sam Howell absolutely has a chance to start for the Seahawks down the road, Corbin. And, as you said, I think this was not so much a trade out of desperation. I thought it was a trade out of inspiration. I think that anytime you see a quarterback who comes into the ACC and sets the conference record, 38 touchdowns thrown as a freshman for Mac Brown, who is as old school as you get as a college head coach. And then he earns the starting job for Ron Rivera, who is, as old school as you get for the Washington Commanders. As you said, he's only 23 years old, has a full season as a starter in the NFL. And the Seahawks made this trade for basically marbles. I think that this is a high upside, very low floor kind of a trade that, assures that you have a quality backup, which the Seahawks, of course, had under Drew Lock. But now you're getting a guy who's younger, has every bit the arm talent, and a third of the price. I think that this was just the Seahawks stealing, quite frankly. Look, I am a big fan of a lot of the quarterbacks that are available in the 2024 NFL draft, but none of them would have required the move, or all of them, would have required a much bigger investment than what the Seahawks just gave up for Sam Howell, who is younger than most of those quarterbacks, has every bit the arm talent. And I have a great deal of confidence that he will be a better fit in Ryan Grubb's offense than a lot of the quarterbacks that might have been available to the Seahawks at number 16 overall. Corbin, I don't want to come off as having like these Seahawks blue colored glasses here, but I love this move for Seattle. I think that this is exactly what John Schneider has been kind of itching to get himself a quarterback. I think he wanted to draft one, but considering the age of Sam Howell and the fact you still have him on a rookie deal, I think he basically was still able to kind of scratch that itch just in a different way.
There are so many reasons why this trade, and I felt this way as soon as the info came out that the Seahawks had made this deal. And I've talked about it some here already on the podcast in our instant analysis pieces, but there were so many things about this trade that just screamed John Schneider textbook deal, because he's not giving up that much. At the end of the day, yeah, you traded away pick 78, but you only moved down roughly 20 spots. You have a 4th rounder that you added. You have another 6th rounder. You still have the same number of draft picks, and you're bringing in a quarterback. And Schneider pointed this out on Seattle Sports 710 a few hours after this trade went through last week, that the 23 years old aspect of this is a huge part of the equation. You're talking about a player that has cap hits below $1.5 million each of the next 2 years on a rookie deal. You've got 2 years of club control at a really cheap price. He started all 17 games for the Commanders last year. He finished 10th in big-time throws, according to PFF. So you know the arm talent is there. The guy can throw the ball downfield. Seattle saw that firsthand. This guy is younger than most of the quarterbacks that are the top QBs in this draft class. And there's players like Bo Nix who are a full year older than him. So John Schneider is looking at this as an opportunity. Yes, he wants to draft a quarterback. He's lamented about only picking 2 in the last 14 years. And yet, I think at this stage, he already looked at their draft picks they had without that 2nd rounder that they traded to the Giants for Leonard Williams. He's looking at the tea leaves here and thinking, I'm going to have to pay a king's ransom to even get in the top 10, let alone the top 5 or 6 picks if I want to get somebody like a J.J. McCarthy, who it's looking more and more like he's going to go really early in the 1st round. You've got your other 3 quarterbacks. Caleb Williams, now that Justin Fields has been traded, it seems all but done that he's going to be a Chicago Bear. Drake May, Jaden Daniels are going to go early. You could see all 3 of those players go in the first 3 picks, and then McCarthy shortly after. So the price they would have had to pay to do that, maybe somebody like Michael Penix is still a possibility, but they've got so many other holes that they need to address with just 1 pick in the first 70 selections and only 2 picks in the first 100 now, that I think he saw the writing on the wall. It's going to be difficult for me to get the QB I want without paying more than what I'm willing to do to jeopardize filling the rest of this roster out. And I can get a guy that I really loved a couple years ago in the draft, bring him in, that's got 2 years of club control and has already shown himself to have flashes of being a really good passer in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, again, as you mentioned, I mean, he's got, I think you said that he was the 10th rated passer in terms of big time throws by Pro Football Focus. Corbin, I watched every single one of his touchdowns. I watched every single one of his interceptions, since he has been brought into the NFL. And, Sam Howell can layer the football as well as any quarterback in this draft class. That includes Caleb Williams. I mean, my goodness, there is a great deal of just physical arm talent with this young quarterback. And I get that he's a little bit undersized, and I understand why Washington traded him away, because clearly the writing is on the wall. The Commanders are going to be making a quarterback selection here with their first pick. And when you have a quarterback who played as gutty as Sam Howell did, and there's going to be a lot of people in the building who are going to say, hey, we should just be starting this guy instead of, whoever the Commanders ultimately decide to select in the 2024 NFL draft. And that's one of the reasons why that I think that Dan Quinn is the head coach of Washington, and just kind of reached out to some of the teams that he was familiar with and just acknowledged that Seattle needed a quarterback at this point. And again, just the price point, the talent that Sam Howell has, the upside that he possesses, I think all of those things just make this deal just so logical from the Seahawks. And again, if you know for a fact that a Michael Penix is going to fall into your lap at number 16, that a Bo Nix is going to be available at number 16, and you're going to be able to acquire the offensive linemen, linebacker, safeties, whatever the case might be, the other position of concerns for this club, then sure, maybe you can wait for a month and a half and just roll that dice. But once the Seahawks got an offer like this, I thought they just made all of the sense in the world just to pull that trigger, get Sam Howell on your roster. He's going to push Geno Smith. I love the fact that John Schneider said Geno is our starter, but also acknowledge what a competitor that Sam Howell is. He is going to push Geno Smith. Geno Smith is either going to have an even better year than he's ever had in the NFL, or Sam Howell is going to wind up starting a few games in 2024.
Yeah, and I think that's what John Schneider's hoping for, one thing or the other. He's hoping that this is a move that really lights a fire underneath Geno Smith, or in this case, hey, I got a 23-year-old that wants to play, and he showed flashes of being a really solid starting quarterback in the NFL despite some rough circumstances. And I'm not going to be, looking from a delusional scope here. If somebody like Michael Penix is available in the early second round and the Seahawks have traded down once or twice to recoup picks, then absolutely we could see him reunited with Ryan Grubb. I don't think that this trade completely deters the Seahawks from picking a quarterback if the right guy falls to him. But this deal came together in part because it was cheap. It was a young player that has shown upside that probably is better than a lot of the QBs that they're going to have an opportunity to get, especially on day 3. And so I do think it diminishes the likelihood. The trade happened for that reason, that John Schneider didn't view this as an ideal situation to get the quarterback that he wants in this draft class. So we'll see what ends up happening here. But I think this trade was made kind of like the Drew Lock coming over in the Russell Wilson trade. This is a guy that we think could be one of the top quarterbacks if he was coming out in this draft class. We loved him 2 years ago. He's got 2 years of club control. Let's roll the dice and let's see what happens when they didn't think there was a great chance that they could be able to put together the package to move up and might not have been responsible to do so to go get a quarterback in April's draft. Up next, we're going to tackle your questions in our Monday mailbag segment. Don't go away. You're listening to the latest edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by Robinhood Retirement. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most of your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th, so get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match, and you must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% match on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. You're listening to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Ray. And a special thanks to all the 12s out there, whether you're listening from nearby Bonnie Lake or across the country in Montpelier, Vermont. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Let's jump into our Monday mailbag, shall we? Tons of questions from the 12s coming out of the first week of free agency. And we'll get to our first one here. Let's keep talking about Sam Howell, shall we? Big story from last week from Josh DeHuman on X. Does Sam Howell fit the type of offense Ryan Grubb is going to employ? If so, after this season or next, do you imagine John is going to give Howell a contract extension? What would that possibly look like? I think those last couple of questions, we're probably getting the cart in front of the horse a little bit here. But from a fit perspective, you and I have talked about Geno Smith fitting in Ryan Grubb's scheme. There seems to be some carryover here that might make this a really good fit for Sam Howell.
Perfectly set up, sir. I 100% agree with you. I think that Sam Howell absolutely has the accuracy, he has the arm strength, he has the touch to be able to make every throw that Ryan Grubb has ever asked Michael Penix to make, or in his previous stops along that college tour. I mean, Sam Howell has Pro Bowl caliber accuracy, arm strength, and touch. He really is a very talented passer. Now, he obviously leading the NFL in interceptions this past season with the Washington Commanders. Oh, by the way, also was the most sacked quarterback in all of the NFL, which says something about the pass protection that he got, and had a Commanders wide receiver crew, and as well as tight ends and running backs that also were among the teams that were the most prone to drops. So he didn't have a great deal of help for him. But that said, there is no denying that Sam Howell has the ability to justify a big time, investment in his talent. You have to be Nostradamus to be able to actually predict exactly what's going to happen over the next couple of years, where, we ultimately decide whether or not John Schneider is going to bring back Sam Howell. But still, I think that the talent, made this a move that made an awful lot of sense. And I think that there's a great deal of reason to be optimistic that Sam Howell will be here for the long term.
Our next question coming from Rodney1453 on Threads. Do you think Seattle will regret not going after Justin Fields? Why was there such limited interest in him from other teams? So the first part of that question, I don't think John Schneider is going to be regretting this. If Justin Fields ends up lighting it up in Pittsburgh down the line, then maybe he will look back and wonder, why didn't I make this trade? But I can tell you from speaking with multiple sources close to the team that Justin Fields was never really anything more than just on the peripheral for the Seahawks. After Drew Lock signed with the Giants, Sam Howell jumped out immediately as the guy they wanted to go after, and John Schneider had a much higher grade on him. And quite frankly, you look at their two careers to this point, I know that Justin Fields is in that Lamar Jackson class in terms of athleticism. He had over 1,000 rushing yards a couple years ago. The guy is an absolute dynamite out of the backfield, but he has never thrown for more than 2,700 yards in a season. He's never eclipsed 20 passing touchdowns in a season. Last year, he finished next to last in big-time throws in the NFL, and Sam Howell finished in the top 10. Now, Howell was in a much more pass-heavy offense. There are some things to consider there, but you have just seen a lot more on the field that suggests that Sam Howell can be a potential franchise quarterback than what you have seen in 3 full seasons from Justin Fields. He just never took that step forward, and certainly circumstances impacted that. Maybe Pittsburgh ends up turning things around, especially now with him having Russell Wilson to mentor him there. But I don't think that the interest was there because, quite frankly, talking heads, you can call us talking heads, but talking heads, fans, I think, view Justin Fields in a different light than the actual decision makers in the NFL. That's clearly obvious. If there were teams that wanted to get him, plenty of opportunities to do that, but I think that the passing issues are really what stand out here, whereas Sam Howell, even with all the picks he threw last year, that was with 612 passing attempts, and he did a lot of really good things in an offense that put some obstacles in his way that made it a little more difficult for him to be successful in his first full season as starter. So I just think that there's a night and day evaluation with these two guys. There were a lot more teams interested in Howell than there was Fields, and I think it has to go back to the accuracy and the ability to handle the passing game against NFL defenses. Our next question from Defo Arian on X. With the guard position so scarce, even with the lack of draft capital after the Howell trade, did the Seahawks pick a Troy Fautanu if he sits there at pick 16?
I think that has to be a consideration. I don't know that Troy Fautanu has to play that guard position. I mean, he came in with 34.5-inch arms, and he has every bit the agility to be able to remain outside at left tackle. But sure, if he is available at number 16 overall, and I don't think that is a lock. I mean, this is a guy that deserves to be a top 15 pick. But if he is available, then I think he is one of the very few players in this draft, Corbin, that would cause John Schneider to say, you know what, maybe we should just kind of stick and pick. I think that he really wants to trade down from this spot and be able to acquire maybe a later first-round selection, definitely another couple of picks on day 2 and second and third round, just to be able to kind of fill out their roster. But at the same time, Troy Fautanu is that damn good. Jackson Powers-Johnson is that good, and left guard is clearly a position of concern. So, yeah, if the Seahawks are going to stick at number 16 overall, Fautanu and a couple of other guys from the Pac-12, I think, make an awful lot of sense because, again, that is a position of concern for this club.
It is worth noting that Schneider the other day said that guards are often overpaid and overdrafted. So I'm wondering if that might be an instance where he's giving some foreshadowing that, hey, at 16, I don't know if I want to pick a player at that position. But if you can get somebody like Fautanu at that position, then I think it would be difficult for him to want to trade down if you can bring in somebody that could start right away at guard and give you that insurance in case Abe Lucas is not able to stay healthy at the right tackle position. Next question from Catman Did on X. Have you guys taken a sneak peek at how San Francisco, the Rams, and Arizona are doing in free agency? Any early thoughts? So first thing that I'm going to say is, Aaron Donald, you were one of the very greatest, but good riddance. Thank you that you are going to be retiring. But you look at the rest of the Rams offseason, being able to re-sign Dotson, who you and I both thought would be a really fun target for the Seahawks to upgrade the interior offensive line, being able to bring him in. I love the signing of Cameron Curl to go in that secondary. I was shocked that he went for the price that he did. I figured he was going to get more money on the open market. It took a few days for him to get a contract, but I like what the Rams are doing. And even Colby Parkinson going there, that could be a really interesting fit. And meanwhile, the Arizona Cardinals, they added Jonah Williams to that offensive line. They've made a few other moves. Desmond Ritter's now their backup quarterback. They've done some interesting things, not necessarily the splashy moves, but it's been an interesting offseason for them. And San Francisco, with limited finances, they lost Eric Armstead. That is a huge loss for that defensive line, but they have brought in some key players in their secondary that could give them an opportunity to keep that defense going. And so I think all three of those teams have made some strong moves, but clearly to me, the Rams are the big winner, even with Aaron Donald's retirement. They've done a really nice job adding some nice players on both sides of the ball, and they overachieved last year. They think they got a chance with all those young players coming back in year two that they can be really good in the NFC West this season. Adding some key pieces in free agency is only going to help with that. Our last question here for Rob, coming from Derek Spoon on X. Do you think the Seahawks will try to re-sign Quandre Diggs at a cheaper price, as he's yet to sign with another team?
I think perhaps. I don't think that the club has to at this point. I think that they are, happy with what they have, and especially the signing of Rayshon Jenkins, to me, changes everything. I mean, you have a safety now that you are bringing in that has a great deal of positional versatility. We've talked about this before. Julian Love also has positional versatility. I was really impressed by what I saw with Jarek Reed, saw it with Kobe Bryant. I think that this is a safety class, Corbin, that the Seahawks can get themselves younger and cheaper at that position. Look, Quandre Diggs is a terrific football player. Just like I would have argued that I would love for Seattle to bring back a guy like a Bobby Wagner or a Jordan Brooks or a Quandre Diggs. Again, just because of the fact that this is still a quality football player who brings a great deal of leadership. But at the same time, it feels like this is a Seahawks club that is not afraid to be kind of turning over a new leaf here. So I am not surprised that Quandre Diggs remains a free agent. And I don't think that the Seahawks need to bring him back as much as they might want to kick the can should he be available a month from now, and especially if the Seahawks are unable to bring a safety from this rookie class.
Last question coming from Everett Hawk fan on X. Can George Fant play guard if Abraham Lucas is healthy enough to play this season? So I have learned with a player like George Fant, who is a freak athlete for the position, never to say never, but he has never played a down at the guard position his entire NFL career. Abe Lucas doesn't have a background at guard. This truly is an insurance policy right now for Abraham Lucas. I don't think the Seahawks are bringing him in with intentions of sliding him inside and seeing if he can start at guard. They're not going to do that with Abraham Lucas either. That's not going to help his knee. Some fans seem to think sliding inside is going to help. I would make an argument it would be worse if his knee is giving him issues. So I don't see either one of these players playing inside. That's not why George Fant was signed. He got a deal up to $14 million for 2 years because he could have to start a lot of games at right tackle if Abraham Lucas doesn't get over the hump with that chronic knee issue. Up next, we're going to revisit Mock Draft Monday after the first week of free agency, specifically going to be looking at how mock drafts have been impacted by the first week of free agency and quarterbacks moving up the board. How is that impacting the Seahawks with their first-round selection? We'll take a look at several first-round picks coming up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by Game Time. You shouldn't have to start ripping your hair out when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices viewed from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. If you want to see the first and second round of the NCAA tournament, thanks to Game Time's awesome flash deals feature and a detailed stadium map, you can find awesome seats to watch the festivities in Spokane for under $225. And it's super easy. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right after the day of the event, and the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the very best price. If you find tickets in the same section row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. You're listening to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s out there. Thanks for tuning in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Make sure to check out, we've got our 24/7 streaming channel with Locked On Sports today. Baseball fans, mark your calendars. March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern for the best MLB season preview, coming exclusively on Locked On Sports today. Again, that's March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Be the first to get local insight from the MLB local experts of Locked On Podcast Network. Find it on March 20th, 7 p.m. Eastern. Locked On Sports today, 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. The Seahawks now a little over a month away from the start of the NFL draft coming up in Detroit. We've got a week of free agency in the books. Every team's looking significantly different after the first week, as we see every year. And of course, all those moves made during free agency, whether it's signing a veteran player, re-signing a player like Leonard Williams, trading for a Sam Howell, all of those moves have ripple effects on mock drafts, which I think is going to make things really interesting as we look at a handful of expert drafts. And sometimes we look at the first 3 rounds. Sometimes we look at full 7-rounders. Today, the focus is going to be strictly on the first round, because if one thing is becoming clear, and as we talked about, I think this is why Sam Howell is a Seattle Seahawk now, there is a really good chance, if not a probable chance, that you are going to see 4 quarterbacks off the board in the first 5 to 7 picks. There could be some trade-ups from teams that are higher up than Seahawks that have more draft ammo to throw in a trade, but that is going to have a dramatic impact if those quarterbacks all go off the board that quickly, Rob, on who could potentially fall to the Seahawks at another position group.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with a scout that I have a great deal of respect with. I just said, hey, the Seahawks currently have the number 16 overall pick. Will there be a single defensive player that is selected before the Seahawks are on the board at number 16? Because there is expected to be such a run on quarterbacks, as you alluded to. I have argued, as have many others, that this is the best offensive tackle class that we have seen in at least a decade, probably closer to 2 or 3. And the wide receiver class is absolutely loaded as well. I think that you can, just off the top of your head, list a dozen players that could be selected at those 3 positions before the very first defensive player is selected this year. And so that, to me, makes this a really interesting draft for the Seahawks, because there's a lot of times when you're sitting there number 16 overall, there's not going to be a lot of interest in a possible trade down scenario, but there could be in this draft class. And so that, to me, is one of the things that makes this most interesting. Corbin, I'm eager to see what the mock draft prognosticators out there have for us, because again, the trade for Sam Howell, the free agent additions of 2 starting caliber linebackers, the addition of the safety as well. Seattle, for the first time in at least a week, feels like they are going to be able to either trade down or take the best player available rather than just having to kind of fill a hole.
Those moves definitely have given them more flexibility. As you said, normally teams are not looking to trade up into the middle of the first round unless there's a quarterback that they want. And that's usually how trade downs work. There's a QB, but in this case, if you have a run on offensive players, there may be some teams in the back half of the first round that are looking at, hey, I can get a guy in other years that might have gone in the top 10 on defense that's available there at number 16. So it does open things up a bit for the Seahawks. Looking at some of the mock drafts out there, our good friend Doug Farrar from USA Today has Dallas Turner, the edge from Alabama, going to the Seahawks. James Mechie from ESPN has Liatu Latu from UCLA. So we've got two edges going to the Seahawks. And again, this goes back to the point that you were just making, that those are players in other drafts that maybe they go in the first 10 to 12 picks. But with all the talent there is in the offensive line, quarterback, and receiver, even a tight end in Brock Bowers as well, you could have offensive players go the first 13 or 14 picks. And somebody like a Dallas Turner or a Liatu Latu could be standing there for the Seahawks to either dangle that pick or say, you know what, this guy's a top 10 caliber player. I'm going to sit here and I'm taking this guy to add to Mike Macdonald's defense.
Yeah, I think it would make an awful lot of sense. I mean, that's the thing, is you have a defensive-minded head coach, Mike Macdonald, who is looking to make an immediate impact. And obviously, you've seen flashes from Boye Mafe. You've seen flashes from Uchenna Muoso. Hell, you've seen flashes from Dale Taylor. Have you seen consistency from any of these guys? And so that is one of the arguments in which I think that the Seahawks are going to be kind of questioning themselves here. If they see a player like a Dallas Turner, who in my opinion is the greatest combination of twitch and power as far as edge rushers in this class. Liatu Latu is a player, of course, he's a soft spot in my heart as a Morris Trophy Award winner. He's the best player on playing on the defensive side of the ball in the Pac-12 this season. Led the conference in sacks and tackles for loss and forced fumbles. I mean, oh my goodness, at number 16 overall. Of course, you would love this kid, especially given who he is on and off the field. But he's got some medical questions about him. So I think that he is going to be a player that the Seahawks would be interested in, but I don't know that they would actually pull the trigger at number 16 overall. There was another mock draft a little bit lower on the board there, Corbin, with Kyle Stackpole of CBS. They actually had the Seahawks going inside with Byron Murphy. And again, he makes a great deal of sense as well as a pass rusher. I personally had Jazon or Johnny Newton, as a lot of people list him as, from Illinois, who would make some sense just considering the fact that, like Byron Murphy, he is a penetrator, but with Newton, he is a player that, of course, is a great deal of familiarity with Devin Witherspoon, Seattle's selection a year ago. Either way, considering the fact that this is a Seahawks squad that does need to get a little bit more pressure on the quarterback. Look, I think right now on paper, left guard is clearly the biggest position of concern. But if you want to get a difference maker on the defensive side of the ball, they might need to stick and pick at number 16 overall with one of the players that all three of these men just mentioned.
And I want to switch gears here because this is one of the other fascinating developments that could come out of this first round, because we talked about the offensive talent, and you could have a run on offensive players and still have first round caliber offensive linemen that are available at pick number 16. That is how deep and talented this offensive line class is, particularly at tackle. And the two picks on these latest mock drafts that intrigue me the most: Kurt Popejoy from DraftWire, Olu Fashanu, the tackle from Penn State, who there are some people out there believe might be the most talented tackle or highest upside tackle in this draft class. If he falls into your lap at number 16, is that a case where the Seahawks with Abe Lucas's injury history, or even the case, is Charles Cross going to be that guy we thought he was going to be in the top 10 selection? Maybe you consider that, and then you might want to move one of those guys. Or Amarius Mims, the tackle from Georgia, who Ben Solak from The Ringer had selected by the Seahawks at pick number 16. I'm not sure that I would see either one of those happening, yet at the same time, they could draft a tackle like a Fatanu who they think can move inside. Maybe they would view somebody like Mims as a player that could do that. If they are looking for versatility that can play guard and tackle and provide another hedge for Abraham Lucas, and you've got a guy that's clearly a top 10 caliber talent that falls to you there, like a Fashanu, that would make a ton of sense. So I think that what the main point is here, that if that many quarterbacks are going to go off the board early, and with some of the moves the Seahawks have made in free agency, they do have more of an ability to take that best player available than what they did a week ago.
They do, but I love the fact that there is such a kind of a hodgepodge of players that all these prognosticators are kind of anticipating that Seattle might select there. To me, that suggests exactly the scenario that John Schneider is looking for. That's why I do think at this point it makes an awful lot of sense for him to pedal that pick, drop it down a few spots, acquire some more selections, as he has done 9 of the last 11 years.
And all those names we just threw out there, like if they've got a chance to pick 3 or 4 of those guys, then you have all kinds of leverage to move down 4, 5, 6 spots and maybe recoup a second round pick or another third round pick, or maybe you can get a third and a fifth. It depends on how much interest there is in that selection, and that varies year to year on what players are there. So this is what John Schneider wants. He wants that flexibility, and he wants that incentive for other teams, especially without that other third round pick now. He wants that incentive for them to come up and try to make that trade. And so he's hoping that a handful of these guys are there so that he doesn't have to force the issue at number 16 and still get a really good football player while adding extra compensation to draft somebody else with a new pick on day 2. As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Subscribe and follow Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we come back on Tuesday, we'll have the latest on the free agent scoop in the NFL, and we are going to revisit the Seahawks depth chart on offense and defense. Where are their biggest holes at more than a week after the start of free agency as we head closer to the NFL draft? You won't want to miss it. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. Go Hawks.